Women join sports for empowerment, not to feel like sexualized, because women already feel sexualized outside of sports.
If you're doing well, then more people are going to come watch. If you're not doing well, then they're not going to come watch. That's kind of just how it is.
It's very upsetting, like as a female athlete, to hear that women are looked down upon like that compared to male athletes.
Emmy Henley, soccer, from Papillion, Nebraska, and I'm a senior.
Emily Lenners, I'm from Adams, Nebraska. I'm a senior and I play volleyball.
I'm Chandra Farmer. I play basketball. I'm from Hastings, Nebraska, and I'm a senior.
Gina Douglas, head women's basketball coach and assistant AD.
Bill Gavers, men's basketball coach.
My name is Travis Fiesel, and I serve as the president at Hastings College.
Katie Geralds, I'm the head women's basketball coach at Marian University.
Been stereotyped as being a cult, bitchy, cliquey, dramatic.
Dumb blonde. That volleyball is an easy sport to play. Like super tall, skinny giraffe.
In order to be, NCAA Division I or even in the WNBA, you got to be this huge, you got to be tall, big, strong.
Those sexist remarks, basically, that, women belong in the kitchen, women belong taking care of their children. We heard them. We heard them when we traveled. We heard them when we played. And our question was, why are we hearing this when we're playing? Why are you at our game? You're paying to come and watch us play ball.
Every athlete, whether they're female or male, all have the dream as a child to go on and play their dream sport at the collegiate level, or maybe even past that.
I started playing sports when I was 3, so I've been an athlete for 18 years. And soccer was actually the first sport I played, so I've been playing soccer for 18 years as well.
I've been an athlete since probably 3rd grade. Started volleyball playing at YMCA League since then, so definitely started volleyball as one of my first sports.
I have been an athlete since I was about 7 years old. I started playing basketball when I was 7, and I was also a gymnast when I was 7, so I've been an athlete just as long as I've been playing basketball.
No matter if they are a guy or a girl, the same amount of time is put in. Same amount of practice time, weightlifting, and conditioning time, and game time is all put in to be the best. The dream is to play in front of a packed arena, to play for a conference title, the chance to go to nationals and perform on the biggest stage, becoming a 3-time All-American.
Lead for the Mustangs. Farmer with it, drives it. She'll go left side and makes it! And it will be a tied game, and we're going into overtime.
Or even winning a national championship.
Hastings College, your 2016 NEI Volleyball National Champions.
During the season, they spend on average 18 to 20 hours a week playing their sport, whether that be lifting, watching film, practicing, or playing. It is just like any other male athlete. They have dedicated themselves to their sport over their lives to get where they are today. They get up early or stay up late to get work done. The grind does not stop just because they are a female who is also an athlete. From Google, the definition of an athlete is a person who is proficient in sports and other forms of physical exercise.
Emmy Henley, senior midfielder from Omaha, Nebraska.
Number 7, Emily Leonard. Number 9, Clara.
And guard, a 5'3" senior from Hastings. Number 4, Chandra Barker.
Every athlete has a story of why they started playing sports, whether that may be because of a person or a group of individuals that they look up to that inspire them to start playing their select sport.
Top 2, Abby Wambach and Lionel Messi. I think Abby Wambach is just a beast. Just someone that I've always looked up to just as a person, as an athlete, being a woman as well. And then Lionel Messi, one of the best in the world. That's what you hear all the time about him. You can't say anything less about Messi than just how great he is.
The volleyball player that I admire most would be Jordan Larson, just because she's from Nebraska. She played volleyball in Nebraska, and she's currently on the U.S. Olympic team. So I think that's pretty cool. It's pretty admirable.
A lot of times growing up, I didn't watch a ton of basketball. I probably watch more now than I did, obviously, growing up. But when watching, I would always really like Sue Bird. What I like about her, she's just like kind of super subtle. She's not super flashy, but she really gets the job done and really makes smart decisions and passes the ball really well, and she's really smooth. So that was kind of something I admired about her.
Being an athlete comes with highs and lows, but for every athlete, hard work eventually pays off with lasting memories.
I have number one is making it to the final site my junior year. Just the whole experience of beating CMU in the blizzard and then just traveling down to Alabama and being down there. It was an unreal experience. And then number two would be winning a conference ring my junior year as well. Number three is winning back-to-back conference tournament championships, 2017 and 2018. And number four is beating number 5 Benedictine my senior year. And number 5 is playing the Tom game in all of our 6 a.m. pregame practices. It was my favorite drill. And then like outside of college, we played in a tournament. I played up 2 years on a team in this huge tournament, USA Cup. And we ended up making it to the quarterfinals of the tournament, and we played against a team from Canada. So that was a really cool experience.
My most memorable moment playing sports was definitely my freshman year in 2016 when we won nationals. Although I didn't play, I didn't like see court time, it didn't really matter because our volleyball team had such a great chemistry and great dynamic that it was an all or nothing. Like everybody was all in or we weren't, and we just had such a great group of girls that allowed us to like go out there and win it and go crazy. It was awesome. I don't want to make it all about winning, but like it kind of is. My junior year of high school, we won state volleyball, so that was really cool. We actually got runner-up my sophomore year of high school too, and we had no seniors that year, so we had the same team going into my junior year, and then we won state, so it was awesome. And then we were also undefeated that year, so it was a good feeling.
I would definitely say the best memory from high school would be winning the state championship both years, my sophomore and senior year in high school. And then my best basketball college memory would be, at this point, like a specific memory, like a specific game, I would say is this Marion game. My sophomore year, was that sophomore year? Yeah, in was it Sweet 16? Or no, yeah, Sweet 16, because we made it to the Elite Eight. So Sweet 16 when they were the defending champ, and defending champ obviously still, but back-to-back champs, and then we obviously played really well and we beat them, so.
Even for coaches and/or old athletic directors, they all have a reason why they are in the position they are in today.
Really, my older siblings. I was the youngest of 5, grew up on a farm, and at that day and age, you didn't have a lot to do besides go outside and play, and they all kind of played everything, really good athletes growing up, so just kind of followed in their footsteps. And then I had a high school coach, Kathy Minbrink, who still comes to our games and is very involved. Great high school coach. Looking back on it, you didn't realize probably the impact that she had on you at the time, but looking back, that she had a huge impact on us and why we were so good, and probably why I really got into athletics. When I was playing at the University of Nebraska, and I was a nutrition major. Really liked it. Loved my classes. Loved what we were doing. Didn't know if I wanted to be a registered dietitian though, and so my college coaches said, "Why don't you just go be a grad assistant somewhere and see if you want to get into coaching? You can get your master's paid for." And so I was lucky enough to get a job at South Dakota State as their grad assistant, and then obviously have stuck with it since then. So it was kind of not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, and then kind of my college coaches saying, "Hey, you might be a good coach, maybe you should give this a try," type of thing. Let me see, well right now, we were just talking about the little Oregon point guard. Yes, my team was just talking about how good she is and how much we like watching her play, and I would agree with that. They were on TV the other night against Stanford, and I told Chandra what we do offensively this year is kind of, obviously, we're not as good, but what Oregon does with their ball screen offense. And I said Chandra was like the Sabrina of the NAIA, so we kind of based everything off of that. But really like watching her play right now. And then coaching-wise, let's see, probably people that I've coached with, and I'll still be in touch with them, but I've taken a lot of stuff from them. The head coach at South Dakota State, Aaron Johnston. I worked with a guy named Mike Jewett, Dave Krauth. All really good coaches, all have won a lot of games, and I was lucky enough to work with them. So it was just kind of very fortunate to be in that situation, and you know, like I said, still be in touch with them and still able to ask them questions about how they do things and why they do it, and get their perspective.
It's a great question. A lot of it, my father was a big influence on me. He was an athlete, and then just watched a lot of sports on TV growing up, and those things had a big impact on me. Coach Mike Trader, I played for at Omaha Bryan High School. That's when I really became interested in the coaching side of it. Obviously, I love the game of basketball. I played it a lot, and then, you know, I enjoyed the coaching side of it, the strategical stuff and the motivation of players, and that was he had a huge influence on me. I've always been extremely fond of Larry Bird, just because, you know, athletically, he wasn't playing really high above the rim. He could, but he was so fundamentally sound. His passion for the game, his love for the game, the way that he trained was really phenomenal. And then, again, I just have tremendous respect for Coach Trader, who I played for at Omaha Bryan High School, and then I played for again here at Hastings College. Doc Farrell, when I first came to Hastings College, was the coach. I redshirted a year, and then I actually played at Dana College for 2 years under a guy named Tom Brosnahan, and he had a big impact on me as well.
Absolutely my father. So my father was a college baseball player, and as a young father, I became his playmate a lot of times, sort of post-college, and so certainly brought me up to play baseball, but I was his partner to play tennis. Certainly trailed around with him as he was playing different levels of basketball, even through his 40s, and so was definitely prompted to play via my father. It was an interesting moment for me that I began to pursue a path more clearly in the academic world, pursuing a graduate degree in English and literature, but I missed being around sport, and so in the very early 90s I went back to sport and took my first job in higher education, which was as an assistant baseball coach. At least in the baseball world, followed some of the home run kings of the 70s and 80s. So somebody like Reggie Jackson and the good Yankees teams. I remember them very much. But also growing up in Omaha, remember the George Bretts of the world that played for Kansas City. In basketball, I have very strong memories of the Magic versus Bird era. And at least in football, I grew up a Buffalo Bills fan of all things, and so followed the Bills through their early years and then on out through their failed Super Bowl years in the 90s as well.
My sister, she's about 4 or 5 years older than I am. So when I was 4 years old, I got drugged to the gym, and I picked up a ball and I fell in love with it. I watched her play basketball. I was at all of her games keeping stats. I had my own little stat book watching my sister play ball. And I just fell in love with the game. Sometimes I wonder why I coach. I was still playing professionally. I finished my last season up in Portugal. I was 28 years old, and the job in Indianapolis came open. I'm from the city. Thought, you know, what the heck, I'm gonna go for an interview. It's a good process, right? I think as I kept playing, I blew my knee out, bad ankles, started to learn, okay, what's next for me after basketball, and I wanted to stay involved with the game, and coaching made sense, and I got the job. Never interviewed for a job, never coached a day in my life, and I got the job, and the rest is history. Growing up, I was from Indianapolis, obviously, but Reggie Miller was my diehard, my go-to. His loyalty to the city, to the Indiana Pacer organization, played 18 years, never won a championship with us, but didn't go chasing rings. He was my man. Right now, it's LeBron James, diehard LeBron fan. But on the women's side, I got the opportunity to play with Sue Bird. I played with Lauren Jackson and Swin Cash and Cheryl Swoops and all these like big, powerful names. And just being able to, I didn't play a lot of minutes in the WNBA, but just being on the bench with them, and then having to guard Diana Taurasi, having to guard Simone Augustus, Tamika Catchings. If I had to pick one person right now, you know, Catch is not from Indiana, but she's moved to Indianapolis since she's retired, and what she's done with our community, our city, that's probably who I would say I look up to the most.
Title IX was passed in 1972, and now 48 years have passed that women's athletics are still getting downgraded to male athletics.
I think that female athletes don't get the recognition that they deserve. Obviously, like, female sports haven't been in like our society as long as men's sports have, but just like with the growth that female athletes have shown, we still don't get like the recognition that a lot of athletes deserve. Like a lot of times, a couple examples, like you see a female athlete showing like emotion, like when Serena Williams like threw her racket down, they said that was unprofessional and classless, but you see a male athlete do something like that, like they throw their helmet down, they pound the ground, it's seen as like passion or love for the game. And a lot of the times, I think female athletes are scrutinized more, like they're kind of more under a microscope, where if they succeed, if they do well, they still get discredited, like, oh, like, well, what is she doing that makes her so successful? Like, they don't really like give credit to that person's talent. They just immediately try and discredit that person, even like if they don't perform or if they don't reach their potential, then they're still under scrutiny. And yeah, I don't think that they're seen as equal or seen as equal importance as male athletes.
I feel like male athletes definitely have like a higher status. You see them more on social media, more on commercials. Their games are posted more on TV. There's just not as much broadcasted for women, and it never has been that way, but hopefully that makes a change and women start becoming more broadcasted in the future.
Obviously, I think the big difference, especially between once you get to those higher divisions, NBA, WNBA, is the opportunities in pay, in which I obviously think that has been clear for a long time. But I will say, just as we've seen recently with those big improvements in the WNBA, obviously that kind of side of it is improving, but there's still that like clear distinction between the opportunities in pay between the male and female athletes. So I would say that's the main difference.
The whole society, I don't know. I have probably a different perspective, just because I've been pretty much coached by females my entire life. I've been around, I had 4 siblings, 3 of them were sisters. My mom was a pretty strong personality. So my perspective is probably a little bit different, I'm gonna say, than maybe society's perspective. You know, I don't think there's a huge difference. You know, I know that people probably don't like to watch women's basketball as much as what they like to watch men's basketball, and men's basketball is a little bit more athletic and everything like that. But I've never been in a situation where women have been treated differently than men just because of who we are. You know, not been given as much, not been given opportunity, anything like that. Very, very thankful for that. You know, there's a lot of struggles to get to that point, but in my life, I've never really had a situation like that. So to me, we're treated equal. You know, it might not be quite as exciting. We're not going to go out and get some crazy dunk or anything like that. But, you know, it's been great here. It's been great every place I've been at. I've been very, very fortunate to be in a lot of places that treat females with a lot of respect and not different than any other male athlete.
I know the pay is a big issue because I'm a tennis player, and in tennis it's a big deal. You know, the women are fighting for more pay, the men get more pay, and the men play 5 sets and the women play 3, so there's a lot of different issues there, but I understand it. Everybody wants to be paid, and they want equity, and they want to be equal. You know, in terms of female sports, if you look at University of Connecticut, you and I have had conversations about UConn basketball. It's packed at UConn basketball, and so they probably get better attendance than the men in terms of percentage of people in the building. So I think that the WNBA has made tremendous strides in giving women opportunities to play at the professional level. If you look at women's soccer, huge deal in this country. So definitely there are issues to be ironed out in terms of pay and equity and things like that. But I think the progress that has been made has been tremendous.
I take a long view of this, or a longer view than this, and think about the sort of historical continuum. So that if I reach back into the early 1900s and then through the 1950s, very little female participation at all. We move into the early 70s with Title IX, and move into the 70s and 80s, and it was very much more about participation, and participation growing then over the next couple of decades. I think we're at an interesting moment where, particularly in college sports, which is where I focus a lot of my attention, we're talking about monetizing college sports. How do we have more bowl games? How do we pay more for bowl games? But I think you're seeing more of those monetizing efforts in women's sports right now. So coverage of women's sports seems to be at a higher pitch, and yet I think it's fighting the traditions where women weren't allowed to play or participate at full levels. So you have that very interesting tension of monetizing versus participation, and a history butting up against that right now.
Wow. How are we different? How are we viewed differently? So that's a loaded question, because we are viewed differently. But I think the tide has started to turn a little bit. I think what the women's soccer team, the national team, started to do, you know, the extra flair, the playing with so much passion, I think that they've started to change things for the women's side. What Serena Williams has done in the game of tennis. And then you look at these, you know, these powerful women in the WNBA who are starting to change and, you know, change the way we view. Like, it's okay to be passionate about your sport. You don't have to be this female, you know, the wife, the cook, the stay home with the kids. It's okay to be a powerful woman. And I think, you know, the USA Women's National Team, soccer team, and, you know, Serena, Sue Bird, Tamika Catchings, these guys have really, like, just said, hey, it's our time too. It's not just the men here.
Overall, just like just one word that like stands out is inappropriate, just about the whole how female sports are marketed and the idea that women need to still include sex appeal when that has completely nothing to do with their sport. I mean, unless they are like willingly like signing up for lingerie football, like that's what they want to do. But if it's completely separate from that and people are still saying that there needs to be more sex appeal for people to watch, I think that's completely inappropriate and it dehumanizes them. It completely takes away the whole reason why people watch sports. Like, the people or women join sports for empowerment, not to feel like sexualized, because women already feel sexualized outside of sports. About like the whole like screen time with like March Madness, I think it's completely unfair. People can argue about what brings in more revenue, but it's like, have you ever thought that maybe women's sports would bring in more revenue if you gave them more like screen time, or if you advertised more for those games? And also just like about traveling, that kind of stuff. It really is just confusing to me why people prioritize these things. Like, they'll prioritize a men's team because it's a men's program, people watch them, but they don't prioritize like the same program from the same school just because it's a women's team. I think that's really unfair, and it not only says like a lot about that organization, that institution, and that program itself, but also just about still us as a society, like how we still separate everything so much by gender.
It's definitely really upsetting to hear that women are like getting underpaid, and especially with like pregnancy, not getting paid for that. that is beyond ridiculous. It's very sexist, in my opinion. So it's very upsetting, like as a female athlete, to hear that women are looked down upon like that compared to male athletes.
I think just like you said, it's the money thing, but a lot of it is just the stereotypical, everyone wants to watch men's basketball, not women's basketball, right? So obviously, and not even just NCAA, but you get up to NBA and WNBA. How many WNBA games do you see on TV? Almost none, really not that many. And every NBA game, it will be on TV pretty much. But I think it's just that part of it has to do solely because of that. I mean, with the TV and just people wanting to watch men over women is just like the money that it generates is kind of what helps that. So, I mean, if you can't generate enough money, obviously, to fund those other things that you need funded, it's not going to be possible. So I think a lot of it is really just that, people wanting to watch men over females, and then obviously the men can generate so much more money than the females can. So it kind of is a vicious cycle, and then how do you break that is the problem.
I think we've gone a long ways, but obviously there's still, we still have a ways to go type of thing. If you look at just when Title IX was passed and everything that's happened since then from the 70s on, I think there's been huge, huge strides, and I'm not trying to take it away from that. It's been great, and it's obviously why I'm coaching and why our athletes are playing today. But there's still work that needs to be done. But I think we're making strides towards that. If you just talk about what the WNBA just passed last week, I think that's huge. Especially maybe because I'm pregnant, but the maternity part of it, So stuff like that I think we're continually making strides, and I think people are more and more aware of than maybe what they were in the past. The other part of it is, then we have to hold up our end of the bargain as well. And I think, like, you got to put a good product on the floor. And I think that we've done that for the most part. If you look just like at our team, the crowds that we draw, we've talked about, hey, you got to put on a show for them then. If people are going to come watch us play, then you got to make sure that you play hard and you compete and, communicate and all that fun stuff that we talk about a lot. So, like I said, I think we've gone a long ways, but there's still ways that we need to go too.
Well, I think historically, if you look at any issue involving any sort of equity, it takes time, and there's a progression of things that happen. I'm not a great business side person, the economics, but I know there's a huge economical element to coverage of athletics on TV, and so I don't have the numbers of what percentage of the viewing market watches female athletics versus male athletics. And so I think that's where most of it's driven. Everything is pretty much money driven in our society. And so those people, I think, really study numbers. But from my perspective, if you look at it, growing up, there was really no female athletics on TV. Like I said before, I'm an old guy, born in the 60s, and so there was nothing in terms of female athletics. Now you can turn on TV and find a female sporting event pretty much every single day. So I think there's been tremendous progress, and I think there will continue to be tremendous progress. There was no WNBA when I grew up. Women couldn't play professional basketball, and now they can. I think you look at soccer as well. You look at different types of sports. So there has been progress, and I think there will continue to be progress because you've had a lot of instrumental people in fighting for women's athletics to grow.
This is, again, that there are elements of wanting to monetize sports, and in general that comes from viewership and sponsorship. But the traditions and the history do not have the same kinds of viewership or sponsorship related back to women's sports. So if you think about something like the NCAA tournament, the distributions back to conferences above and beyond just participants themselves is related to the coverage and the sponsorship that the men's tournament receives. The women's tournament does not have that same amount of sponsorship, therefore the distribution isn't as robust. It is a conundrum for me that in many ways we still are pulling back on our traditions and trying to break out of those. I find the WNBA new collective bargaining agreement to be heartening. It's a move absolutely in the right direction. I find it heartening that the Women's World Cup team received significant notoriety. over this past year, but I don't know that we are fully untethered from our history and our past of not celebrating women's achievements in sport.
Wow. You know, you just read a bunch of things that are true about where we have been, maybe where we are still. The not getting the same amount of money, not getting the same amount of publicity. I think when you talk about true fans of the game of basketball or true fans of a sport, they appreciate what women do. Because you're talking about the true fan. Now the average fan just wants to see dunks and, you know, long three-point shots and great passes. But when you just talk about fundamental basketball, women's basketball is incredible. We coach our team this year, and people who have never watched women's basketball because they're like, oh, it's women's basketball, right? Why do I want to come and watch? And they come to a game and now they're stuck. They come to another game and like, well, you know, these girls can play. I think we're starting to turn the corner there, and it goes back to what I said about, you know, Megan Rapinoe and those guys with the U.S. Women's National Team, and then the WNBA, what they're doing. The NBA has been so great in empowering the women's game. I think we were cut short on Kobe Bryant's life, but Kobe Bryant was starting, you know, with his young children, he was starting to turn the corner for that empowerment of women in sports. And with the help of the NBA, the WNBA, I mean, it's huge, right? We should get those things because we're doing the same work. We might not be able to jump as high, we might not be able to run as fast, but we're putting in the same hours in the gym, we're putting the same hours in the weight room, practicing, traveling, the same, and we should have those opportunities.
One way to get people to come watch any sport, both female or male, is to market your sport. Thankfully, with social media today, it is much easier to do.
This is something that I do, and it's also something that like everyone on our team does. We just make like a game day post, whether it be like a tweet or a story. We just like to post like a picture of us playing the sport or a picture of the team, and we just try and make it as like eye-catching as possible, whatever, like adding cool like swirlies or like putting a cool song with the picture and just like adding details about the game. And it's pretty hard to miss the fact that Hastings College Women's Soccer has a game because everyone posts about it. So I figure if everyone's posting about it, you see it 20, 30 times, you know we have a game that night. I don't know if people really like look at it and really care and like look into the details, but I just like posting it because it's, yeah, we have a game, you should know about it.
So we like post on social media. Usually a lot of like the upperclassmen girls will like post pictures and we'll say, hey, come out to Lynn Farrell Arena and support the Bronco volleyball team tonight. Or we also have like Hastings College Volleyball Twitter and Instagram accounts, so they usually post about game day.
I say, especially in the town of Hastings, for how small we are, really the only thing you can do is social media. You got Facebook and Twitter that are huge, and kind of like you said, depends on how well you're doing. And word of mouth, I think, is also huge, especially in this small of a town. Word travels fast here. So I would definitely say, based on how well you're doing, if people hear that you're doing well, they're going to come. If you're not, then they're not going to come. But then also social media, because obviously a majority of people have Facebook and Twitter these days, so they'll see things like that. But I would definitely say those are the main two ways.
Some of it is just social media. You got to put it out there, and I think that's how a lot of people communicate now, male, female, old, young, whatever. You know, you got to make sure people know when you're playing, what you're doing, how well you're doing type of thing. You know, and then the other part, I think we're very, very fortunate to be playing in the GPAC and have great teams around us. So you're going to have big games, and you're going to be able to market big games probably week after week. You know, if you look at the end of our season schedule, we just have a gauntlet of top 25 teams, you know, so hopefully people will come out and support that just because it's two good teams playing against each other. So I think in that regard, we are very fortunate. I mean, games are tough and it kind of wears you out, but at least, you know, you have a good product to put on the floor.
You get a group of young women that play basketball the right way and that play hard and respect it. We talk about it all the time, just respecting the game of basketball. When you respect the game rewards you. And then doing it the right way, playing hard, that's what people start, like true fans really want to appreciate. They appreciate the playing hard and, you know, diving on the floor and taking charges and all that, the beauty of basketball, right? We're not going to dunk it. We're not going to throw alley-oops. We're not going to hit, you know, Steph Curry range threes. But if we can play good fundamental basketball, and then you just find people who love the game and you get them to come and then you get them to bring a friend. And I tell them all the time, I said, if you come to one game, you're going to be at another one. You're going to be hooked.
For some female athletic programs, it takes winning for the crowds to start to show up more, but generally it helps if a bigger game versus another ranked team is happening. For the Hastings College women's basketball team, who was ranked number 4 in the country, they played against number 1 Concordia University. There was a crowd of 2,300 people plus that packed Lynn Farrell Arena, but then a short 11 days later, there was only a couple hundred to watch the Broncos, who were then ranked number 2 in the country, play a non-ranked opponent.
Don't take it for granted, okay? We have very few games left in reality, okay? We still have an opportunity to play a game that you guys absolutely love to play at home against a good team with a good crowd, okay? If it's Sunday, if it's Monday night, if it's Friday night, whatever it is, don't take it for granted, okay? Enjoy it and let's go get a win.
You know, I think that, then again, people are like, oh, it's just women's volleyball, like just a women's sport. We don't have to support them unless they're undefeated or unless they're top in the nation. That's usually when people only will come out. Other than that, I mean, people don't usually show up. We don't really have much. We didn't have much of a student section this year just because we weren't as great as we were my freshman year, which was 2016.
I just think people want to see a good game. You know, if you're asking people to come out in the cold and pay an entry fee and sit through 2 hours a game and then a break and then 2 hours of a men's game, you know, they just want to see a good game, and I don't blame them. You know, I think that's a big part of it. You know, I just think that you had whatever we were ranked at the time, 1 versus 4 or whatever it was, and so people thought, all right, this is going to be a great game. Let's go out, brave the cold, and come out and support them. You know, and the other part, there's just a ton of stuff going on. You know, with high school sports and young kids are so involved in everything. It's hard to get people out here to support us and come to every single game just because there's 12 million things going on with their lives. So I think that's more of it, like it's just a big game. You know, this is a great opportunity for us to bring our daughters out, or our kids out, or our sons out and support them. And, you know, I don't think there's any reading into too much into it.
For Marian University women's basketball program, it was a reversal after winning back-to-back national championships.
I think for us, in all honesty, we took a reverse effect because people almost got tired of us winning, right? Like, you're going to win, why are we coming, right? And then this year, we started to really turn the corner and get those kids back and enjoy the college experience. Played college basketball. Some of my funnest memories are going to the men's college games or going to our volleyball games when you get to be a fan of the sport and a fan of your school. And there's something about this generation that sometimes they're like, oh, I'm too cool to stand up and cheer. I don't know what it is, but I think we've started to turn the corner again to get back to, hey, go crazy. You know, watch Duke and see the Cameron Crazies and make it enjoyable, because you get 4 years to be in college, 5 years to be in college, but make those years the best of your life.
Most women's professional sports were not really looked at unless it was for being on the U.S. Olympic team. The first Women's Soccer World Cup was in 1991, and the first Olympic appearance was not until 1996 for Team USA. It was not until 2012 when the National Women's Soccer League was founded in the United States. For women's basketball, 1976 was the first U.S. team to appear in the Olympics, and then in 1996, the WNBA was founded. For women's volleyball, the only way to play professionally is to either go overseas or to otherwise play for the U.S. team.
Yes, I wanted to play. I wanted to play basketball my entire life. I wanted to go to college, wanted to go play in the pros. But when I grew up, there was no WNBA, right? It was, how do I make it to the NBA? And it was, oh, come on, girls don't make it to the NBA. But then, right when I get to high school, right, the WNBA starts to form, and now these dreams start to come true for little girls. So yes and no. Yes, because I knew I wanted to. Nobody ever told me that I couldn't. And then once the WNBA came, it was, hey, chase your dream.
For the sport of volleyball, the uniform is normally known for tight-fitting uniforms and not covering as much as other sports. And for some, this may be the reason why people come to watch and not the sport itself.
I do feel like guys come watch volleyball because of the tight uniforms, because of the spandex, because they're always like, yeah, we gotta go support the spandex, not that we have to go support our women's volleyball team to win. Volleyball is very like sexist in that way, that people go just to like look at the girls and just like look at their bodies because our uniforms are so tight.
It is never easy being an athlete or coach with the countless work that is being put in. For being a female athlete, though, there always are people who dislike female athletes because, quote, it's not physical enough. There may be a lack of attendees at game and a lack of recognition of how much time is actually put in. But all one can do is market for this generation by educating others we are around and to help the future of uprising female athletes.
I would just say, like, just stay confident, because that's honestly like the best thing about female sports is the amount of confidence that it does build for females and women everywhere. Like, don't let anyone take that enjoyment away from you. Like, just because one team's getting more attention than your sport doesn't mean that you need to take anything out of that. Like, just kind of like how we would always joke about, like, oh, people only come to women's soccer games because the men's game, they only show up like the last 15 minutes of our game because it's 15 minutes before the men's game starts. Like, we joke about that, but it's like, we're still not gonna let that affect, like, I'm not gonna let that affect me. Like, I'm still gonna enjoy my sport. So I would just say, like, just stay confident in your abilities. Like, remember why you're playing the sport and the enjoyment of the sport, and it's like, rely on your teammates. Like, no matter what, when you're having like a tough crowd, or if you have no crowd, it's like you're playing for your teammates essentially.
There needs to be more publicity with female athletes because men in their sports are so highly publicized that women don't even hardly get any kind of coverage. And I think that also like has to do with like branding and like all sorts of things with like male athletes.
As you see, like the WNBA players and the ones that kind of have more of a voice, obviously using their voice, as we have seen, that's made an impact just recently with all the changes. But another kind of hard thing about it is, like, especially at our level, it's kind of a, if you're doing well, then more people are going to come watch. If you're not doing well, then they're not going to come watch. That's kind of just how it is. So, and then another stat that you stated was something about how like the dropout rates are so much more in females, and that's really not going to help the situation. So I would say putting in the work which is hard, especially as you grow older and a female and you're in the WNBA, but putting in the work and just the dedication to your program. And once people start to see that, then they'll respect that a little bit more. But if people are just if the turnover is just gonna keep going like crazy, then it's just gonna make that hard to be possible.
If you're gonna promote everything, then making sure that you do your end of the bargain as well, and you play hard and you communicate and you put a good product on the floor type of thing. But I think some of it naturally is going to happen as girls play sports at a younger age, and they get better at a younger age, a little bit more athletic. You just look at the weight training side of things, that's evolving daily in how we treat female athletes and what we do in the weight room, and injury prevention and all that stuff. So hopefully some of that will just come along naturally, and we'll kind of be able to promote our product a little bit more.
I think as a fan of the game, it's pulling somebody who's a fan of the game who's never been to watch a women's game. Go watch, right? Don't just go watch and really appreciate what these athletes can do, and not pay attention whether it's the sex appeal or the short shorts or the tight uniforms, but actually understand and appreciate their craft, right? The work that they put into it. The same work that most people put into their daily jobs is, athletes put in this kind of crazy work, the eating regimen, the taking care of your body, and really appreciate and respect and learn to respect that work, because it's women playing sports is a beautiful thing.